So Wake Island, Phil and Nadim, correct?
Yes, I'm Phil.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us at Montreal Rocks. Where are you guys today? Just at home in Montreal?
Yes, where we've been for the last year and a half.
I know. And it's kind of a weird day in Montreal today because it's the middle of April. Like 2 days ago, it was hot and sunny, and today it's snowing.
It's snowing. I don't care anymore. I always expect an April snow.
Yeah.
And so we're home anyway. So
because I know like Prince had that song, Sometimes It Snows in April. And like he obviously never came to Montreal because it always snows in April.
Sometimes it always snows in April. The good thing about April snows is that they don't stick. So I know that the snow will be gone by tomorrow. So
maybe Prince was on tour and happened to be in Montreal in April, and he's like, what the hell, it's snowing here. And then maybe, sometimes it snows in April.
So you guys you met in Montreal, but you're not originally from Montreal, correct?
Indeed.
Am I right?
We're both from Lebanon.
Tell me about how you guys first met.
Sure. Yeah, we moved here independently. We didn't know each other in Lebanon, but like very many young students, there is in our country where we come from in Lebanon, there's this like trend, unfortunately, where students leave their country to go study. And I mean, I say unfortunate because the idea is that you go learn skills and bring them back to the country. But increasingly, we've been seeing that there's actually a brain drain going on. And we are part of that phenomenon where we just leave the country and then we see what's going on back home. And then, the living conditions get harder and harder, opportunities get decrease with time, and then you end up building your life outside of the country and never really, like coming back to visit or to do projects or whatever, which we have done since we came here. But we, now we are Canadian citizens, we live here and all that. So we came as students and we met coincidentally here. We were going to McGill University, both of us studying different things. We met randomly, started making music, and we're involved in very many different projects, rock bands at first with other musicians and so on. And yeah, here we are today, 17 years later.
So when was that? When did you actually start making music together?
I think we started in 2006, 7, sometime around there. We were just jamming in different bands with friends. And as I said, like we kind of integrated the music scene in Montreal that was burgeoning around then, a lot of independent venues, a lot of small promoters promoting, like local music. So we were very interested in this scene. It was very eye-opening for us, because back in Beirut, when we left, there wasn't very much going on the independent, alternative sort of DIY spaces. I mean, the country was just trying to get back from like a civil war, and there was a lot of partying going on, a lot of like club music was happening, but you couldn't really see like live bands so much when we left. So it was something new to us here. And we got drawn into it, and we kind of were very interested in the kind of underground stuff going on, which was very much English speaking actually, because we're in Quebec, we're in Montreal, so we were drawn into the indie English stuff because it was just interesting. And yeah, we played in many different bands as band leaders, like us writing our own music and playing together, but also joining other bands and as like playing different instruments and stuff. So we learned a great deal from this phase.
What kind of music were you playing to begin with, and how did that develop to become Wake Island?
I personally, I can speak for myself, then Phil can I guess add this a bit. When I came to Montreal, I was actually obsessed with jazz music, which explains actually why I chose to come here in the first place.
For the Jazz Fest.
Yeah, I was, as a teenager, after exploring a lot of like pop and rock and all that stuff, I kind of got bored with it, and discovering jazz artists was like a mind open, like it opened up my mind as to what music can be, this form of expression can be, improvised music and breaking boundaries and all that stuff. I was very much into it. And so I learned about, I had VHS like tapes of, you know, the Montreux Festival in Switzerland and then the Montreal Jazz Fest, which was, you know, had its, I would say its glory time, like in the 70s and 80s. So I had tapes of artists that I loved that played there. And I'm like, oh, I want to go there. And I don't know. So I started here in Montreal. When I got here, I was into jazz, and I took a lot of classes at McGill and the conservatory and played in very different groups. That was before I met Phil.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, from jazz, kind of like what I loved about jazz was this idea of breaking the rules, I would say, like breaking, like taking passionate musicians who had music in them, had a message, you know, that they needed to express, and would use music as a medium, but would shatter what that medium is and redefine it. And that's what I actually, after so many years now, I understand what it is about jazz that I really, really loved.
Yeah.
And then I saw that same spirit in the indie underground scene of Montreal, where the music medium was used, but then songs were being exploded and shattered, and you could feel a human soul. And that's something that really drew me into that style of music, I would say. And I guess I started exploring that way of songwriting with Phil in our own bands, like just taking structures, breaking them, trying to express ourselves. Sometimes it's very loud, sometimes it's very messy. That's the kind of music we did. It was very influenced by jazz, by classical music, which was more Phil's upbringing. It's kind of like a melting pot of different things at first.
I did grow up learning classical music and then listening mostly, honestly, to pop radio when I was in Lebanon. I didn't know much about music history or jazz or rock or anything. And then by mistake through movies, I discovered mostly the work of songwriters, the contemporary ones like Amy Mann and Fiona Apple and Tori Amos, and mostly female actually, that were just through soundtracks. I used to listen to a lot of soundtracks, and I was learning classical music. But then these artists, for some reason, just really clicked in my head through the power of movies. And then I started to get into their discography. And that just gave me a real desire to, on one hand, write songs to express what I was feeling, because there was a lot going on in teenager Phil. And on the other hand, I always had this desire to like score movies. So in a first, I actually studied film at some point after I came in Canada. And what really took me to music as a career was learning sound for film and just designing sound, designing music for film. And that's where I met Nadim. So that's what I brought at the beginning. So we ended up with a band. Our first band was called Intensive Care. And he was, as Nat said, influenced by jazz and classical music and movie soundtracks. And it ended up being very, it ended up being classified in some way as like prog rock, just because of the atypical songwriting and structures and, you know, like 9-minute songs that would evolve. So definitely I could see that prog rock was a proper label, I guess, for it. But that's also how we discovered a bit of prog rock, which wasn't really my cup of tea, but I did see the similarities. And what was interesting is actually looking into the people who did all these albums, and like King Crimson, Genesis, like even bands like Pink Floyd, and you just look at their biographies and they sounded very much like us. A lot of them were in science, studying science. A lot of them were like classical music. Like you could see why this kind of music happened for us. And on a more personal level, definitely it was like the turmoil of having left our home, having left Lebanon, had started to like really get into the music, and has always been all the way to today. It's always been a defining force in our music in very different ways. And back then it was defined as like a lot of confusion, I guess. Like the music was, I mean, confused in a good way, but it was it didn't want to be one thing. It wanted to be many things at the same time. And that's what made it prog, I guess, in some way. And then as we evolved, playing with other bands here that weren't our bands and not our songwriting, we learned a lot about how to write songs that go maybe straight to the point, and and that are just one thing and one idea, and it's just about like a vibe. So that definitely rubbed on us all the way to when we formed this project, Wake Island, which is just the two of us. And also stylistically, we got very, very bored with playing rock music. Not because it was not nice, just because we felt like we couldn't innovate that much anymore, and we wanted something a little more open. So that's why we pivoted to using electronic tools rather than like amps and guitars and drum sets. So the music itself, the songwriting for us hasn't changed that much, honestly, but opening up to these other tools really opened up the way we think about music and the way we think about also democracy in music and access to, like, for someone to be a musician. I think electronic music has very small barriers to entry as when it comes to budgeting and studio costs and touring costs and all these things. We love that about it. We also love that it wasn't a genre so defined by a particular culture. In the case of rock, it was very, very white male dominated. That was the vibe. That was the crowd. It was difficult to make a name for ourselves, not fitting in any of rock music's boxes. Like, we weren't writing the songs that rock music expected us to write. We didn't look the way it was expected to write. So we're like, you know what? This is not where we belong musically. And so that was one of the reasons also we just wanted to explore something else. And as I said, logistical reasons. It's just so much easier to tour, so much easier to write. We have our own studio now. We don't need to like have like a crazy big studio with tons of equipment and repairs, and all this really actually liberated us in terms of how playing music, just to be like, we don't care about getting the perfect synth sound or the perfect bass amp, or we just care about writing songs that have feeling. And once you let go of that, like, it really frees you up completely. And that's the power also of choosing the right medium for you.
Yeah. And I can tell that culture and your background from Lebanon is very important to you, and you want to make sure that that's an integral part of your sound, would you say? And with the name Wake Island, there's a good story behind that. Tell us where you came up with the name.
Well, just with regards to the musical influences, we definitely want them to be part of our music, but we try very hard to not make it cliche. Or like, we don't want to be that band that sounds like Oriental, you know, because we could do that if we wanted, but it just doesn't feel right, because this image that people have culturally of Lebanon and of the Arab world is very narrow and very biased and very based on, honestly, on not much, on like the news and terrorism and things like that. And
of course,
I think the most people have heard Middle Eastern music sometimes is a movie soundtrack or a series soundtrack where there's like some scene in Baghdad or something, and then it's just like airy kind of like musicians and then a belly dancer and things like that. So we want to kind of break that impression. And we also have a party that we started called Laylit. So we do that in New York and Montreal. And that's for us very important to showcase that the Arab world has a lot of diversity musically. And like, it's really like incredible what can come out of it, and incredible how Western music and Middle Eastern music communicate and get inspired by each other.
I just want to add to something Phil said is very important to us, is also in terms of redefining things. We want to be part of a movement of artists now here. We are Western artists, right? We live here, we're in Canada, we're in New York, we're active on those local scenes. Something that we found very, very limiting and unfortunate is the way music is classified. If a language is not English or French, then it falls into world music, which we find is really ridiculous. And if you hear like an instrument that's not a Western instrument, then automatically you're in, in world music. And that's like such an old concept that's just very, very, colonialist view.
Yeah, I agree.
And we're trying to free that, because we're like, the music scenes are super diverse here. Like, in Montreal, there's so much going on. In New York, there's so much going on. In all those cities, in London, and in the world, and artists are coming with different stories and different sounds and different concepts. And it's just music. And the idea that we're trying to do here was, Phil was saying, like, yes, we are influenced by this heritage that we carry forward with us, but we're not you know, we're trying to redefine what it means to be someone from Arab origins, an artist from an Arab origin, and what we can bring to the table. So if we choose to sing in Arabic, it's not world music. It's just this song happens to be in Arabic because it feels right, because it's right. With regards to the name Wake Island, it was actually a little bit random. There is not much depth to it, but we were at the transition phase where we were switching between bands and stuff. We felt like we needed a new name. And we were just, I don't know, we were just chilling out one day, looking at the map of the world, just thinking about, you know, people traveling and immigration and the whole globe and whatever. And we spotted this tiny little spot, like in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, literally like between Asia, the continents of Asia and the continent of North America. And we found that was kind of like an interesting middle point geographically that kind of represents a little bit this idea of us being a cultural hybrid, coming from the Asian continent and now living in the North American continent. And the name was cool and fun. And we're like, yeah, sure, let's go with it. We later realized that there's history, there's a war that happened there. It's kind of like a US military, base, but like all those things are like, yeah, whatever.
Actually, funny story. We were at South by Southwest 2 years ago, playing a show, and they have this program where artists can apply to like be hosted by locals instead of having to pay hotels and things like that. So we applied to this program and we got it, and then we arrived at the house of our host, and they asked us like what our band is, and we're like, oh, we're called Wake Island and everything, and then the guy looks at us and he's like, you're kidding me. And we're like, no, why is there a problem? He's like I was like the general in charge of Wake Island during like God knows when, like 30 years ago. He was like, because it's actually a Navy. Yeah. It's actually now, it's been a Navy base for years, for decades. So it's very interesting that we actually met them, and it kind of gave us like kind of relief, because when we discovered this thing, we were like, are people going to get mad that we're called Wake Island? And we're like, if he's not mad, we're good, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I believe that some of the songs on this new album, the subjects are not necessarily what many electronic pop musicians would be touching on. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah. I mean, electronic is, as I said, it's just a tool for us. I mean, in the heart of hearts, in my mind, we're still in many ways a rock band, and the subjects were not like we don't like to, like, the music category that we get put in doesn't dictate what we write about. We just write about what we want to write about, and that can be a challenge in terms of like commercialization sometimes of music. But we've learned not to care, because we needed to write this record and we needed to write about this journey. But then again, what the songs are about, like if I dissect them, we're telling a story, we're telling our immigration story, we're telling all these things. But the way we write the songs, and that's very voluntary, is to make them as universal as possible, because we realize that the experience we went through, leaving home, coming here, getting adjusted, facing racism, facing all these things that we felt, can be felt in many different other situations by anyone. You don't have to be an immigrant to face this. You don't have to be Arab to face this. You could face this. Anyone could. It's this idea of being alienated and not heard, and that's really the story we're telling. It's how to like get to a place of confidence that you can be heard while still being kind and trying to like improve society. That's the story really we're telling here.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, electronic pop is not always about substance. I guess it's still about like fun and relationships and things like that, which is totally fine. But some of our songs you could read as relationship songs, but it's not the I love you, let's have fun under the sun type of music we're trying to make here. And that's just you can't force it, you know.
Yeah, you talk about the album being a bit of a story of, you know, of how you got to this point in your life. Would you consider it a concept? Are the songs linked, or how do you see it as a full album of songs?
I mean, I guess it could fall under the concept, but it's not really conceptualized in a way that is rigid. It's a thematic album more than a concept album. There's no like secret links between the songs, and honestly, the song order could be anything. Like it's not a linear story. Every song covers a facet of it, but some facets are covered by many songs. Some facets are just not covered at all. Some facets are just a feeling, that it's not everything is in the lyrics. So, I mean, having listened to concept albums, I wouldn't put that in there because it implies that there's like a grand plan, which isn't the case. The concept, I guess, was to start with our immigration story and take it to like the universal feeling on all the songs, except for one or two maybe, where it was a bit more precise. But generally, the idea was like, what have we learned from that story, and how does it apply to like more of a mainstream approach? Like, is it unique to our experience or is it beyond our experience? And but we still wanted to make it very clear that there's also the personal story being told here, and also that's why the title of the album is what it is, and that's why the artwork is what it is. That's why there's some Arabic, that's why there's 3 languages. It's because we wanted it to be absolutely that there could be no mistake that this was our perspective. It's not like a generic album about alienation. It's alienation seen through our eyes,
Yeah, I was really interested to see that you use the different languages, because that's something that some artists might be wary of, because they might think that they're going to alienate people, whereas you could see it as being more inclusive at the same time. Like, was there a deliberate thought process that you were going to use the different languages? What were you thinking when you decided you were going to do that?
I think there's one thing about languages before that what we wanted to achieve with this work, and I think that was our goal, and I think we met that goal in many ways, is we're trying progressively as we evolve as artists to express the truer versions of who we are, like to be as true to our essence as people as possible and as artists. The two of us, like very many Lebanese people of our generation and the younger generation, we kind of express ourselves in 3 languages. This is something comes very naturally to us. Like, we speak English, we speak French, we speak Arabic, and we mix those things. And so when telling the story, it did feel right. It was not calculated in the sense that we're not thinking, we want to make an album, there's going to be X% of tracks that are going to be a certain language. And, it really felt like the story had to be told in those languages, because that's how we felt it. That's how it felt right. The songs that are in French is also, there's feelings that happened when we were trying to integrate, say, the Quebec culture here, which is very French. We so happen to speak French, and we're not forcing it. Like, we can communicate very fluently in this language. So, these songs are expressed in French. When Arabic is used, it's because, say, we're actually feeling something that's very, that came from our leaving experience, and that we share with a lot of Lebanese people, and we wanted to basically make that feeling universal to our people, and other folks from the Arabic diaspora. So there is, like, whenever we choose, language is like a tool in this record. Like, whenever we take something, it's because we want to express a certain feeling while making it universal at the same time. So, like, a track like Daya that has Arabic in it also has English to basically make the message more universal, and so that people can understand. We're not trying to exclude the audience. On the contrary, I think we're trying to bring people into this world and make them realize that within this world, there's also a need of communication with a certain demographic that have experienced a certain thing,
When your mind is used to multiple languages, some feelings that we go back to are expressed in French in our mind, and some are expressed in Arabic, and some are expressed in English, depending on where we lived the experience. Like, when I lived in Lebanon, I barely spoke English. Like, I knew, but there was no context in my life for me to like communicate in English. That started mostly when I came to Canada and went to McGill. So for me to remember, to be nostalgic, say, about like what was happening in my adolescence, it's very hard for me to write it in English because the feelings are formed in French, for example. So that's another reason also. And that gets even more complex by the fact that when we came to Canada, there was also the French situation where, okay, so I was like immersed in an Anglophone environment, but my main language was French growing up. So getting to reacquainted with communicating in French in Quebec was also a thing that happened, because my circles in Quebec switched very much from like Anglophone circles to Francophone circles in the last 5 years. So then there's the differences in French, because coming from Lebanon, our French is more like French. And then you have the Quebec French, and then you had to learn all these this new way of speaking French and all these new expressions and accents and all these things. So there's that step of adaptation also that is addressed on the record. And so some things you have to stick to, like what your soul's language is. Like when you have memories, they're often linked to places, and in our case they're also linked to language, so that it would be truer for us to write a song in the language of the feeling. And there's a song where we did an English version of recently, and while writing that, the song kind of became about something else. It wasn't you can't say, like, you can't just translate the lyrics as they are, because the feeling is different. So to translate a song from French to English for us, we needed to look at the same subject from another angle, from our whatever our quote unquote English soul wanted to say with that song. So it was an experiment. We were not planning to do it, and we just did it last month and released it out of the blue. And so it was interesting because the song ended up having another vibe. Even the vocal delivery was different. Like, I don't sing in French the same way I sing in English. And that's also based on like my influences. Like, who am I? Like, there's always a certain amount of like influence from other artists when you're performing. So when I sing in French, I'm influenced by a whole other breed of artists that sound nothing like the artists that influenced me in English. And it's very hard to sing like Radiohead melodies in French, for example. Like, it just doesn't work. And some bands tried it and it just doesn't work. Like when you listen to French rock trying to be English rock in French, it doesn't work, because there's something very English about rock also. Yeah. And if it's not English, it has to go so far away from English to have like, to stop being compared. Like, you'll have to go like in Russian or something like that, where it's like, okay, this is so different that I can't even compare. But when you go to like other languages or other European languages, it becomes a little tricky, because it really does sound like you're emulating. Like when people were singing like Elvis type songs in French, I'm like, it doesn't really work. It's like making like samba music in Montreal, but like 4 teenagers on skates, like it doesn't work.
So is there one song on the album do you think represents Wake Island more than any other? If you were trying to explain to somebody what the album was about and you could only play them one song, is there something that you would agree that you would play first?
I don't.
Well, let's decide on. Let's each decide on one, and let's see if they match.
I really think that.
But it's hard. It's a hard question.
We've had a lot of talks about this actually now as we wrap up this phase of our work and enter a new one. That basically what we've done consistently since the beginning of this project in 2015 and our first album in 2016 is that in the end we are songwriters, and the consistent thing about us is the way we express ourselves in music. But we also are very aware that we have affinities for different styles and different forms of music. So I think it's very hard for us to choose one song that defines us, because we are conscious that our work is quite diverse, and it is that diversity in the style that makes our sound what it is. So I'd say, like, to really get a feeling of what the artist is, it's kind of maybe better to listen to the 2 records that we've put out, the 2 LPs, like say Out in 2016 and Born to Leave in 2021 now. And you can see that what's the common thread there? What's the sound? The sound is not like, because if I tell you listen to track number 3 on Born to Leave or whatever, it might make you think that, oh, we're an electronic pop band. But then if you listen to another track, you're like, wait, this is experimental, weird music, Yeah. But the common thread is there's us at the core of it. trying to express a certain feeling, I think. So it's hard to narrow it down to one song.
Yeah, well, I have heard the album and really enjoyed it, I've got to say, and I can see exactly what you mean by that answer. So yeah, that's great. Okay, I'm going to wrap up the interview, but first, before we go, I noticed on your YouTube channel you have some cooking videos.
Yes.
Which I thought was great. So I wanted to just wrap it up with, if you were going to pick one of those videos for a recipe for people to try at home tonight, which one would you recommend?
On my end, from the ones that are already there, because there's a bunch more coming, I like the moussaka one because it's so easy to make and it's delicious, and it's just an eggplant-based dish with chickpeas and onions. It's like so healthy. You can make a batch of it, keep it in the fridge. So that's definitely my personal favorite of these.
Okay. Yeah, I would say that one is a very good recipe too. Like I've tried it when Phil makes it, and it's very good. It's healthy and it's inexpensive, easy to make.
Do you think my kids would like it?
Yeah.
How old are they?
10, 12, and 13.
Yeah, so put some cream cheese on top and they'll like it. Okay.
I think so.
That's the trick for children, and this because it's kind of a stew thing. So children don't tend to be in love with stews. But this works very well with cream cheese, actually. So I would use that trick for them.
All right, I'm going to give that a go. Thanks very much.
Great.
And thanks for your time today. Congrats on the new album. I'm looking forward to everybody being able to hear it. It comes out on the 30th, correct?
April 30th. That's correct.
And hopefully, when the world readjusts itself, we'll get to see you live.
Yes.
Sometime in Montreal. So
for sure.
Hopefully, in the fall, maybe. Maybe that's going to happen.
Yeah, let's keep fingers crossed. And I'll be down the front.
Thanks.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.